And we are live. Welcome to this Stanley Cup final preview episode of Blue Line Icing, presented by ThunderblogSports.com, a part of the Bullpen Cart podcast feed. I, of course, am the G-Man, Jordy Cannell. Joining me after a round off, because we couldn't figure out timing for the Eastern and Western Conference finals, are my guys, Jared and Greg. We'll start with you, Greg Piatelli. How are you, my friend?
Couldn't be happier. Little pissed off at the Celtics for ruining the Boston sweep, or hopes of a sweep. But feeling well. I'm not going to give away my feelings going into the Stanley Cup, so that'll be saved for another pod for another time, aka 5 minutes from now. But Jordy, it's a beautiful, beautiful day in the neighborhood. 70 degrees plus. How you doing?
I'm good. It's finally summery weather here in Pennsylvania, and you can't be too upset with that. About to go play my third round of golf in as many days after we wrap this up. But let's introduce our other guy, Jared Barnes, all the way over from a couple blocks from me. Jared, how are you, my friend?
Gentlemen, I'm well this morning here in the command center, trying to fire up the jumbo vision over here as we chat, and under my second cup of coffee. So I'm buzzing. Greg's buzzing. Jordy, you need some smelling salts.
Yeah, something like that. I threw some water on my face right before we got on, so I think starting to wake up a little bit.
There we go.
Jared, you getting ready for the race today?
What race?
Isn't Charlotte today, the NASCAR race?
Jordy. Sunday is when everything happens. So for those who don't know, I know this is a hockey pod, but the biggest day in auto racing is the Sunday before Memorial Day, a.k.a. the day before. You wake up in the morning, you can watch the Monaco Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can go to the Indianapolis 500, which Roger Penske won his 18th Indy 500, hashtag Lehigh grad, with his driver, who actually looks like the guy from Talladega Nights, who's also a Frenchman. It's hilarious. Look up the photo. And then at night is the Coke 600, which is the longest race.
I thought the Coke 600 was on Monday.
No.
That's my bad.
No, it isn't. But sometimes you get a driver like a Danica Patrick or a Tony Stewart that'll race both the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 if they can qualify for both. So.
Wow.
What a day. Martin Truex won last night. The race ended like 11:30, and then I went to bed.
All right. Very nice. Very nice. Well, boys, Stanley Cup Finals start tonight, Memorial Day, 8 p.m., Boston Bruins versus the St. Louis Blues. Before we jump into it, let's talk a little bit about the storylines. We'll start with the Bruins. A little more of the traditional route came out of the Atlantic Division. We talked about it a little bit. I believed in the Bruins, but we thought maybe Tampa Bay was going to run away with this after their historic season. We thought they were destined to run into that. And Jared was the only one that believed in the possibility of an upset. And boy, was it one. The Columbus Blue Jackets swept the Tampa Bay Lightning out, and the Bruins took care of business against them in the second round against those Blue Jackets before dispatching the Carolina Hurricanes in the form of a sweep in the Eastern Conference Finals. Greg, we'll start with you just since you are a Bruins fan. What have your thoughts been throughout the playoffs, throughout the season, and what are some of the things that you've seen and that you're going to look for in the series?
Yeah, so going into the season, honestly, the storylines were that their rookies, or their younger guys, I should say, those in McAvoy, Pastrnak, DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, all those guys would be that much older this year. So this season, there were very, very high expectations. Some would argue Stanley Cup expectations, and now they've met those. And for them to have the second best record in all the NHL and then have such, I don't want to say easy road because the Stanley Cup playoffs is very hard, but looking at the beginning of the playoffs, you would say, in theory, the Bruins should have played Toronto, then Tampa Bay, then either Pittsburgh or Washington. And those three teams, personally, I thought that would be nearly impossible for them to beat three very, very tough teams. But luckily, Columbus was the right formula to sweep Tampa Bay and get them out of the playoffs for the Bruins. And then Carolina and the Islanders surprised everyone in the first round, beating both the Capitals and the Penguins. So Carolina or the Islanders, whomever it was going to lose to Boston or Columbus regardless. So easy Eastern Conference Finals. Almost a joke. It makes me a little nervous heading into the Stanley Cup since the Blues have been battling it out consistently, I should say, through all 3 rounds. But going into the playoffs, a little nervous. And as we went on round by round, it felt like it was getting easier and easier for the Bruins.
All righty, Jared, what have your thoughts been watching the Bruins throughout these playoffs and for what you had seen during the regular season?
Well, sounds like Greg is saying they're a false Eastern Conference Final champion. That's what that just sounded like to me. Sounds like it wasn't hard enough for him to get there.
They're just a paper chip. They're just a paper chip.
What it sounded like, I hate to say it. Now, the Bruins, as most teams do, they had trials and tribulations throughout the year. And throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, there has been a lot of parity, as we've seen. And, a team gets hot, and then you could be like my guys, and they just get cold, and they're going to dismantle half the team this offseason, which I'm okay with. I really think coming into it, it was, once again, you had the President's Cup trophy winner not do anything. You had the Stanley Cup hangover for the Caps. And then you had a team like Columbus where they pushed all in before Brizgalov put his apartment on sale in Columbus because he's definitely leaving and going to a team in Florida. That's just my 2 cents. But with the Bees, yeah, they're a good team. As much as I dislike some of their players on the team, they made it there, and you can't put that away on them whatsoever. So looking forward here as we get into soon to our preview of the Cup Finals tonight, you can say that they might not have had the hardest, we'll say, road to the Stanley Cup Finals. They're not their Western Conference foes, and we'll get into that in a second. But they still made it there. And in my opinion, once again, Mr. Cliche over here, it's time to throw everything out the window, and you got 7 games. That's what you got now.
Yeah, 1,000%. And we'd be remiss to not mention the injuries the Bruins have had. Guys have gone on and off. Not really the IR because it's the playoffs, but guys have been in and out of the lineup. They've had guys on defense that have been banged up a little bit. Guys on up front that have been been a little bit banged up. But I think the Bruins have really shown, at least from me watching them, their depth and really where they can flex that way. And you've seen a number of different guys throughout that lineup step up, like Charlie Coyle, who was a huge addition at the trade deadline for them. And you've started to see in that Carolina series some of those guys in that first line really step up. So I think, we'll get into the rest versus rust of the Bruins having over 10 days off since their last game coming into tonight, which could be a factor. We'll jump into that a little bit, but I think it's been an exciting road for them and a team that, like Greg was saying, coming into the year, a lot of people thought these guys might have a shot of being maybe the number 1 overall seed, and obviously Tampa Bay had a historic season. So seeing them standing there in the final round now, it isn't too shocking to see if you told me that at the beginning of the season. Yeah. So let's jump over to the Blues, because this has been one of the crazier stories in sports in the last 6 months since the new year. Between that and Tiger winning the Masters, there have been 2 incredible comebacks. St. Louis Blues on January 3rd were in dead last in the NHL and turned things around. They got red hot off the back of rookie goaltender Jordan Binnington. They all bought in, and their entire team has really stepped it up, obviously making the playoffs as a 3 seed, upsetting the Winnipeg Jets in the first round, upset is a little bit of a word, but it was a 3-2 regardless. Then they took out Dallas, who themselves upset the division winners in the Nashville Predators in the, if we want to call it, the Central Division Championship or the second round of the playoffs, before facing a tough San Jose Sharks team who, after coming back against the Vegas Golden Knights, it seemed like they might be unstoppable too, that they now have their own narrative to run. But the Blues got it done, and they now sit here in the Stanley Cup Finals on possibly one of the great stories of 2019. And Jared, we'll start with you. What have you seen watching this team throughout the season and throughout the playoffs, and what are you expecting from them?
So really, you talked about how I picked Carolina as my underdog the way through. There was no more of an ultimate underdog this calendar year, than the St. Louis Blues. Jordy, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it a 5-0 shutout of the Philadelphia Flyers, Binnington's first win?
I don't know if it's his first win, but that's what started the Gloria train after hanging out at a Mummers bar the night before,
which is just taken off.
Yes.
I mean, anyway, we can get a little Flyers jab in there at the same time as praising a team. I'm all for. So
the fact that it took you guys 20 minutes is
Jared,
shocking to me that you hadn't yet. So
Jared, nice job.
Good job by you.
But I mean, that was more just straight fact. That was
no,
not,
it is true. That was the win that started it.
Well, congratulations on the only thing the Flyers won this year. If you want to a jab, is Gritty winning a fucking Webby. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's all you got. Your mascot.
Content machine.
He is.
What a joke.
Prospects coming up, baby.
I know. But
get one of them to trade their no trade clause. Get a couple draft picks. We're gonna see some youth in front of Carter Hart. But let's continue talking about the Blues.
Narrative for the last 75 years.
We're not even 75 years old though. But Blues, please. Blues.
Yeah. So I mean, they just took off, and it was just very interesting to see them. The trials and tribulations they got through. They got hot. They got in, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's cute." They got into the playoffs, and then they started to look really good. And now they're there in the finals. Once again, nobody thought they would make it there, and all because of a song from the '80s. Sometimes you just need that spark, and now you have all that you got. We all we need. There's your Eagles there, Jordy. And let's see what happens, boys. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Greg, what are your thoughts been watching this team in the Wild Wild West, these playoffs?
I mean, it's a testament. The Blues were 15-18-4 on January 3rd. Everyone thought that they were going to trade and get rid of all their whatever, and the GM went the other way, was a buyer at the deadline, turned things around, and since January 3rd, they went 30-10-5 and put themselves in the playoffs. And quite frankly, similar to the Bruins, yeah, Winnipeg is a tough out for sure, but Winnipeg was really sputtering in the second half of the year, not doing great. As Jared mentioned, hot team versus cold team in that matchup for sure. And then you'd come down to the Stars, who beat Vegas, and Vegas was my team to go back.
They beat Nashville. All
right, Nashville. Nashville is my team after Vegas, like the two teams in the Western Conference Finals that I had. But the Blues, obviously, Winnipeg's a great team on paper. The Stars have a couple big names and as a very good goaltending, and then the Sharks obviously do what they do. But great run for the Blues, and you always have to fear teams that have something to rally around. You always have to fear teams that have that X factor. The Red Sox had it with playing New York. Sort of every great team. The first Patriots Super Bowl had it being underdogs, and then the whole team mentality coming out as a team as opposed to individually in the Super Bowl. They started the trend, the first team to ever do it, and every team has copied them since. So the Blues sort of have that going on, have that mojo, and that's a scary thought, and good for them. I mean, they've certainly worked hard and certainly done their part to get there, and Binnington is just half the story. I think the other half is guys like Jay Bouwmeester and some of their older defensemen actually figuring things out, and something to be said about veteran defensemen starting slow and getting hot in the second half of the year.
Oh, 1,000%. And going too on just those bigger than sports storylines. Just think about the city of St. Louis with sports. They lose their football team with the Rams owner just wanting to leave the city. They go to LA. They make the Super Bowl a few years removed from leaving St. Louis. The Cardinals are traditional powerhouse in the National League, but they've been kind of floating around the last couple of years. And the Blues, they've obviously been around since 1967, but they've really had this long-standing test of time of they haven't made it since 1970 when they played the Bruins. And I think there's that factor too, that this entire city has rallied around them. They've waited to see this, and I think there's a ton there. So I think Game 3, when it comes back to St. Louis, Game 1 tonight in Boston is going to be absolutely out of control, but I think this is just going to be two passionate fan bases going head to head, and I think Game 3 is going to be fun to watch the pregame festivities.
Yeah, Jordy, I don't disagree. And a crazy stat about the Blues. The Blues are 9-1 in the playoffs when they score in the first 6 minutes of a game.
Holy shit!
So this season they've been 9-1 in the playoffs when they score in the first 6 playoffs. And the Bruins, on the other hand, are 11-0 when they are entering the third period with a lead. And that's of their 12 wins. That means only one of them they came from behind in the third. That means they're winning in all 11 out of 12 of their games when they were leading into the third. So that just speaks to the goaltending and the defensive mindset of both these teams, that once they have a lead, they don't give it up. So for me, the biggest key, I think, will be who has the lead, because whichever team has the lead early and even going into third, but whoever team has the lead early, I think, will be the team that wins every game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think both teams, we've barely touched on their goaltending, and we'll jump into that when we kind of go unit by unit. But both teams have ridden really hot goaltenders, and we've obviously really talked about Binnington a ton. But Tuukka Rask has been outstanding for them. So I think I agree with you. I think if we get into the third period, one team's got a 1 or 2 goal lead. It's going to be a grind, but I think it's pretty safe there. But yeah, boys, let's jump into it. You want to start with the Bruins offense versus the Blues defense, or Blues offense versus Bruins D? Jared, I'll let you pick.
Let's go with the Bruins offense versus the D.
All righty. All right. You want to start breaking that down?
No, I don't.
All right, Greg, kick us off with this.
Yeah. So Brad Marchand, who reached 100 points this year, and that first line, you could argue that Brad Marchand is like the Logan Couture of the last series for the Blues defense. And the Blues defense did a relatively good job. I mean, Couture had a couple of games where he went off, but other than that, they did a relatively good job of containing him. I think the big thing is that Marchand, 7 goals, 11 assists. Bergeron, 8 goals, 5 assists. Pasternak, 7 goals, 8 assists. They have scored 38% of Boston goals in the playoffs, 22 out of the 57 total goals they scored. And those 3 have attributed to 6 of the 12 game-winning goals that they've had. The craziest part about Boston, though, outside of their first line, they've had 19 different players score goals during this playoff run, and currently riding a 7-game win streak. Their power play is scoring at a ridiculous clip. Their PK is really doing its job, but in terms of forwards versus the Blues D, I think the Blues D are big, but they are a little slower than what the Bruins have played in the last 2 rounds. Yes, the Blues are big and physical on defense, but the Bruins dealt with that with Columbus a little bit and really took it to Columbus's D, and Columbus's D had superstars of Seth Jones and Zach Werenski. So I think at the end of the day, Pietrangelo, Edmonds, Bouwmeester, all good defensemen, but I think the depth 4 lines of the Bruins offense is better than the Blues D.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the depth, once you get past Pietrangelo against the first line, I think the depth, excuse me, will show itself really against that back half, the bottom pairs on St. Louis. So I think that's a really very astute point, Greg. Jared, I'm sorry for jumping on you. What were you about to say?
Fine. So if you take a look at, I got a little stat guy a little bit here. If you take shot on goal percentage for the top line of Edmondson and Pietrangelo, their shots on goal percentage is almost 59%. Their scoring chance percentage is 52%. And those 2 categories alone compared to Boston's 46.4% shots on goal, as well as a 46.9% scoring chance percentage. Now, goals for/against, this is the only defensive category that Boston seems to be leading on their top defensive pair, which is a 13-4, 15 against. Blues are 7-6. But here's a stat that'll put some in there. They have 3 blue liners with double-digit goals this season. Now, that would be the Blues D. Boston has 0. So, in my opinion, you have the depth that that St. Louis has is more than Boston. And you also have an aging blue liner in Chara. He came out with a great.
Jared, we're gonna jump onto the Bruins. We're doing Bruins offense versus Blues D.
I don't care. I substitute my own reality.
Okay.
Get more coffee in you. I give back to the what do you take it, Jordan.
You're talking about Chara, but we'll get into the Blues forwards in a second, but I honestly feel that if we went line by line, if we did forward unit versus forward unit, you would at the end of the day think the Bruins 4 lines are better than the Blues 4 line, just based on line by line comparison. If we went 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, just the edge, and that's just my opinion. I mean, granted, the Blues 4th line has been unbelievable, but so has the Bruins.
Yeah.
And the Blues 3rd line in Maroon, Bozak, and Thomas has been really good, but so has Johansson, Coyle, and Danton Heinen for the Bruins. So it's. I think people are giving the Blues forward depth a little more. You're giving them credence when they're overlooking how much depth the Bruins have had throughout the playoffs. Both teams, I think, are getting production from all 4 lines, which is a scary thing and going to be a great series. I think the bigger point is the Blues defenseman is just not as strong as a unit compared to the Bruins. Yes, Chara at times has looked slow, and he missed the last game with a little injury, but he's also had 15 days to rest because of those games. And I think Carlo, McAvoy, Krug, Grzelcyk, and whoever the 6th defenseman is for the Bruins, right now Connor Clifton, but those 5 outside Chara, I think, have really stepped up. And while Chara is getting beat with anybody who has speed, you saw in the Carolina series and even the Columbus series, unless you have fast forwards, which the Blues don't really have, unless you're Toronto and have the skill to blow by Chara, then he hasn't really been that much of a liability since the Toronto series.
No, and here's one more thing for you guys. Looking at Pastrnak, Bergeron, and Marchand, they have 106 goals and 260 points this season, and they've lit the lamp 22 times in the postseason, 18 times while they've been together. I mean, that alone, you talk about firing on all cylinders. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I saw a statistic, too, something to the effect of if Marchand has a point in a game, I think it was a point or was scoring, one of the two, they're like 21-1 or something like that. I mean, some ridiculous statistic about him in the playoffs. As much as I loathe him with every fiber of my being, he's a hell of a hockey player.
Yeah, and he's an agitator, and he gets in people's heads, and he's done what he's done. And the Blues defense certainly have scored a lot of goals. Just sticking back to the Bruins offense versus Blues D, and the Blues D has scored a lot of goals, but so has the Bruins D. So, I feel like on paper, I'm going to give the edge to the Bruins forwards versus the Blues D.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that on that as well. I think also that the Bruins forwards, I think defensively play a stronger game on the back end with it to support those the Bruins defensemen. And I'm a big fan of the depth. I really like that 3rd line the Bruins can roll out. And I think because of the fact that they steamrolled through Carolina and we saw the bigger names step up in that series, and we haven't needed to see the lower lines really jump out on the paper, I'm going to give the edge to Boston as well.
Whoa.
Ooh, a little alert there.
Yep.
Jared, who are you giving the edge to on this side here?
When it comes to it, I mean, I have to go with Boston. I mean, they are as much as the stats don't lie, and that's the thing. If you're looking at it apples to apples, it's going to Boston.
Hell yeah. All right, let's jump over to the other side. We started to talk about it a little bit, but the Blues forwards versus the Bruins D, and I didn't really pipe in there, but I think The Blues obviously have a ton of depth too. Their fourth line has been outstanding. We've seen Patty Maroon step up a ton throughout these playoffs, and the stories surrounding him with his kids with the super fan have been
on the third line, but
he's third line. I thought he was a fourth liner. But thank you for correcting me. But still, third line, fourth line, but the bottom six forwards. You know what I mean? The story surrounding him and the rest of those guys has been absolutely outstanding. But those forwards too, Tarasenko, who surprisingly only has 13 points, only 5 assists to his 8 goals in these playoffs. You could see him really take a huge step. Jaden Schwartz, 16 points in 19 games. You can see a lot of these bigger names start to step up. O'Reilly, and if they really get it going, along with a guy like Pietrangelo, or if they get on the power play a ton, we could see them really try to take advantage too, because Jared mentioned it, with the struggles that we've seen with Chara, and he stepped it up a bit in that Carolina series. But I think the Bruins D has the ability to slow these guys down, but they're gonna have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, and you alluded to it. Tarasenko really has been quiet the entire playoffs until the conference final, where in the conference final he had 3 goals and all 5 of the assists you just mentioned. So, and part of that was that they had the Blues first line matched up against all the other teams' top lines, and it wasn't until the conference finals where they switched it to they moved the first line matching up with the second line, and that's really where Schwartz, Schenn, and Tarasenko really were able to find some scoring, and let Perron, their second line try and neutralize any other first line from other teams. So I wonder if they try to do the same thing in terms of the Blues lineup. Like you mentioned, Jordy, you mentioned Maroon, you mentioned the third line and the fourth line, and they're matching up with the Bruins defense. I think the Blues offense is a very physical unit, as four lines that are just power forwards, and yes, they have skill. You could argue it's similar to the Columbus forward units, in that they can body the defensemen, they can bully them, and that series was certainly for the Bruins defensemen a grind. And like McAvoy missed a game during that series. Krug, Grzelcyk, all these defensemen got hurt during that series, and that in Columbus. So I think the Bruins defensemen, well, maybe not as big as the Blues defensemen. I think the Blues forward, if they forecheck hard and they put pressure on the Bruins D and hit them every time they touch the puck, I think the Blues forward may be able to take it to the Bruins defenseman and cause some turnovers, and then put them one-on-one with Rask and see how that goes. But I think if they forechecked hard and continue to put pressure and hit the D, I think that'll help them in the end.
Yeah. Jared, what say you, my friend?
Well, I mean, if you look offensively, there's 18 players that have scored a playoff goal this year for the Blues, defense and offense. Tarasenko with 1 point in each of his 6 games in the conference final, 3 goals, 5 assists. And then Barbashev with 2 goals and 1 assist from your fourth liner. That's pretty good. I think it comes down to, Greg, to your point before, if the Blues get a goal within the first 6 to 7 minutes, you have a team that's up and they get that confidence behind them, it's going to be pretty hard, even though Boston, they're one of those teams where we're going to match you. You hit us with 1 goal, we're going to match you within the next 5 minutes. And if we don't, that means your goalie's playing on their head. And then at the same time, too, you will have the D-men of Boston or a guy like Marchand come in and stir the pot to where the D and the offense of the Blues are going to take it. I mean, look what they did to Carolina. I mean, Justin Williams and Marchand were getting into it the whole time. When your captain is the guy that's going to the box, that's an issue. So I really think when it comes down to it, it's the Blues offense is still young in some senses compared to the D-men of Boston. I mean, with Chara being 42, and he pretty much said the other day, and this is the point I wanted to make before, is it doesn't matter of your age or what playoff consistency that you've had, we treat everybody the same in this room. So even though he wasn't in the last game, I think unless he gets truly injured, he'll be in this full series the whole way through, just because his veteran leadership and plus him being the captain.
Yeah, and quickly to your point, yes, 18 Blues players have scored, but 19 different Bruins players have scored. So, it's the depth among both these teams, offensively and defensively, is truly, impressive. And that's more or less why these two teams are in the finals, because they're getting scoring from all over the place, which is huge. And Chara, yes, being older, I think, like I said, has hurt him at times this playoffs. And but he got bundled and tossed around during the Columbus series, which you never see from Chara, or have never seen from Chara in his career. And he really was getting pushed around. And if the Blues take a similar approach, I'm not gonna lie, Columbus series, yes, the Bruins won, but it was really they won because of the power play, and the Blues are in a similar place in that their penalty kill is not as good as the Bruins power play, just based on the numbers this year. So if the Blues can stay out of the box and be as physical as Columbus was to the Bruins, especially forwards on D, then I think this series is a lot closer than people are predicting it will be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this is going to be a real grinded out series. Both of these teams have shown that throughout the playoffs, and you mentioned that Columbus series that the Bruins had to go through, but think about the Blues too, having to go through San Jose and the firepower they brought, and St. Louis grinded them down and won that in 6. And they've continued to do that throughout these playoffs, and have really been able to be almost chameleon-like of matching team at their game and being able to put up towards it, whether it's needing to score first, whether it's needing to be physical. So I agree with you. I think this is going to be a really close, really fun series to watch, and it's going to be incredibly fun. In terms of edge, I am going to give it to St. Louis. I think they do just, it's similar to the Bruins. They just have the depth to find the mismatches against the Bruins D. So I'm going to give it to St. Louis there.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I give my edge to the Bruins D strictly because I think that they dealt with the physicality from Columbus, and I think that they're going to be ready for it this time as opposed to last time. They didn't realize that Columbus was going to be that physical, and having seen it once, you're prepared for it a second time.
Jared, what say you?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with this one just because of, if you take a look at it, and you really always go off your captain. Now with the Bruins, I will have to say, really, they have two captains. I consider Bergeron to be the real captain of the team for them. So if Chara is not giving it to you 100% as your C captain, you look down to Bergeron. I'm going to give it to the Blues on this one.
All righty. Let's jump over to the goalies. We've talked a lot about Jordan Binnington. Obviously, a rookie, has done incredible things for the St. Louis Blues team. And really at the backs of him, he's been outstanding throughout the playoffs and just continuing it on through the regular season. And there's not too much else to say than riding a hot goaltender is one of the best things that you can do to make a playoff run in any sport. Better than a hot quarterback, better than a hot pitcher or hot bat in baseball, better than a hot-handed basketball. So, I mean, what Binnington's been able to do is outstanding. Do you guys have any other notes before we jump over to Rask that you guys want to talk about with him?
Greg, you take Rask, I'll take Binnington and give you some stats here.
There we go. I love it.
You're Calder Rookie of the Year. I'm calling it right now.
Easily, 1,000%.
Finalist.
Bet the farm on it.
So, Jordy, we talked about before how the Blues went since January 7th. Binnington has been 24-5-1, 1.89 GAA, and a 927 save percentage in 5 shutouts. So, not too shabby. He's the 5th rookie goalie in AHL history to earn the team's first 12 wins in a single postseason. However, I say this is you look at what he's done thus far this year in the playoffs. His numbers slipped, and I mean, granted, it's the Stanley Cup playoffs, so they're still pretty good in the finals. 2.36 goals against and a 914 save percentage and a shutout. Kind of sounds like Matt Murray, and just the dreck that he's become halfway through the season. But this guy made it into the playoffs and made it through. I think that if the youthful innocence and ignorance, if he can continue that, I would give it to the Blues. with the advantage. But let's go to the homer. How about Tuca?
Yeah, Greg, what's the deal with Tuca?
So, just so we're all on the same page here, okay? Tuca's save percent, goals against average in the playoffs is 1.84. Binnington's is 2.36. Tuca's save percentage in the playoffs is 0.942, and Binnington is 0.914. Okay, Tuukka Rask has 2 shutouts. Binnington has 1. Both obviously have 12 wins, but I think to say everyone's talking about Binnington. Yes, it's been a great story. Yes, he helped his team get to the finals and into the playoffs first and foremost. But Tuukka Rask, by the numbers, simply has been better, plain and simple, through the entire playoffs. Every single round, top to bottom, only has not really had a weak game yet, knock on wood. He has had a couple weak goals, but nothing that ruined his team's chances of winning a game. They did lose a 2-1 game. They have not yet to lose. They've yet to lose in a blowout fashion, knock on wood again. But the numbers speak for themselves. Tuukka goals against 1.84, Binnington 2.36, save percentage Tuukka 9.42 or 0.942, and then Binnington 0.914. So, numbers wise, you have to give the edge to Rask just based on the playoffs, based on what they've done so far to this point. You have to throw regular season out of the window, and it has to be playoffs only. And playoffs, clearly Rask has the edge. On the other hand, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but Binnington actually played for the Providence Bruins last year. So he has some familiarity with the organization. The organization has some familiarity with him in that maybe they have an advantage. Maybe they know how to beat him. Maybe they know what his weak spots are just based on talking to the Providence Bruins coaches. So hopefully that'll give them an advantage. But just strictly based on numbers and what they've done so far, you have to give the edge to Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, I think the save percentage is the bigger stat here, even though the goals against is nearly half a goal less per game. But I think the save percentage being almost 30 points ahead, it speaks a little more, because Binnington, think about it, has faced a Winnipeg team that, they've floundered a little bit in the second half, but still have a solid offense. Faced a Dallas team that's not really going to affect your goals against that much, but it really showed off his brass there. But then San Jose, where we talked a little bit about Couture and what they were putting out there, I think that affects the goals against. But the save percentage, I think, really speaks a lot to it, because Tuukka, in a lot of those games, really stepped up. And especially in some of those series, he was the reason why the Bruins pulled out some of those wins. And I think if he's playing like the stone wall that we've seen, NHL hit style, I think that he gets the edge there. And that's probably the biggest question coming into this is which Tuukka will we see? Will we see the one that we saw struggle a little bit in a couple of those games, or will we see the one that we've predominantly seen in the playoffs that has been up to snuff and has put up nearly 95% of the shots that has come his way? And I think that's probably my biggest question coming in. And I think tonight will show a lot of it. And that's where the rest versus rust argument will probably come in. But yeah, I'm gonna give the edge to Tuukka Rask as well. I think he's been here before. He's been in these bigger moments in the playoffs. Yeah, he wasn't the goalie that the Bruins rode in the 2011 Cup run, but he was in 2013 when he stepped up big. And I think he's just got that experience. He's going to run that here.
And that was going to be my question to you guys. We talk about Tim Thomas and everything he did on that Cup run, and how Tuukka was kind of like, which Tuukka's going to show up, and that's been the thing since. What do you think this is going to do to solidify him as one of the best goalies in Boston history, Greg?
I mean, Boston's all about what have you done for me lately, right? And it's funny because people overlook the fact that Tim Thomas in the Stanley Cup Finals really was not good. Like, his stats were not what they were in the first 3 rounds. But everyone says that Tim Thomas won them the Cup that year. If you look at the games that they won and they beat Vancouver, it was like 5-4, 6-5. They really, and then the games they lost, it was like 6-0. And so the Bruins offense ended up chasing Luongo from the game in all 4 games they won. So, that I think Tim Thomas. If Tuukka wins the cup, I think everyone will argue that this is just as good as a run as Thomas had. But I think Thomas gets a little too much credit for the Stanley Cup Finals itself, despite the fact that in said finals he was not as good as advertised. And I think, Jordy, you fell into the which Tuukka are we going to get narrative. You fell into the media hype, media spin because
trap.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's people in Boston are just on anyone no matter what. We're talking about Bergeron. Everyone's saying that Bergeron needs to show up this playoffs. And, how can you ask a guy to show up more than he already has when he has, an absurd, crazy amounts of points and had 3 goals and 2 assists in the last series? And
you could be better. You could be better.
No, but I'm saying, you
score all the goals.
Well, you mentioned yourself, Jared. That's just if not Chara, it's Bergeron. So
yep.
I think Boston is just a tough place to be, regardless. And Tuukka is luckily the leadership has kept on to him and hasn't traded him. Like the fans have been calling for his trade for the last 5 years straight. And if he wins the cup, I think no one says another word. And if he loses, I think everyone still calls for his trade for him, even though he had an unbelievable playoffs. So that's just the way it is. And which Tuukka we get, Jordy, I think it's the same Tuukka. I think the difference is that the defense clamps down. And yes, Tuukka's been seeing the puck well, but you mentioned rest versus rust. Guess what? The Bruins have been sitting for 10 days. The St. Louis Blues have been sitting for 7. So it's all the same at this point.
That was something I was going to ask you guys next. Of are we going to overblow the rest versus rust there? But one last thing on Tuukka, his career save percentage coming into these playoffs was 92.4%, goals against 2.25. So he's outperforming both of those, and especially that save percentage. Where the last couple of years he really struggled. He was nearly at 3 goals against per game last year, and a save percentage that was barely above 900. 0.903. So I think the fact that he's really stepped up in these playoffs, I mean, it's putting together a resume for an all-time performance, in my opinion.
I agree. I disagree with you.
Yeah. So it sounds like, Greg, it sounds like you and I are both going Rask. Jared, or are you? Which way are you going with this?
I'm going with young and dumb. I'm going with the Blues.
Alrighty. Before we go into picks, are there any other storylines you guys are watching out for?
Go ahead, Greg.
No, I mean, I was just the biggest storyline for me, I think, is if this 2 things: the St. Louis Blues staying out of the penalty box, and a thing that the San Jose Sharks had said was that the Blues were intentionally trying to injure them. Now that could just be a team that lost, saying things because they're bitter they lost. But when you have multiple players on San Jose saying that they were being intentionally targeted and Blues were trying to injure them, that has to have some credence to it. But if the Blues, it depends on how tight the referees call the games. If the Blues take penalties, I think the Bruins win easily in 5 or 6. 4 or 5. But if the Blues can stay out of the box, if the Blues can play 5-on-5 hockey, then I really think that it's just a matter of which goalie blinks first.
No, I think that's a great point, Greg. I was going to say one thing we need to look at is the coaching. See how you got Mr. Cassidy versus Mr. Bowubi. The coaches, they really go ahead and they mirror their teams. And just look. But then if you come down to it too, I think one of the storylines that we have to look at, boys, going into this, and Greg, you touched on it, I believe, is the NHL officials. Are we going to get the officials that blew the hand pass in the last series? Are we going to get officials that, they take too long to make a call when they're not doing it off of their first, shall we say, their first gut instinct? Or are we going to get a series where the officials, they come in and they don't make a difference and they just call a good game and you don't talk about them? So I think that's another storyline too.
That's actually a really good point, Jared, because it has been obviously we didn't even touch on the hand pass and kind of the Blues just running away with that after getting completely hosed in that game. I'm hoping that we get the ladder of your options we threw out there, that we have just no storylines coming out of the referee's room. I don't think that crew that blew the hand pass is calling Stanley Cup games. So I think we can avoid them. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that the other guys aren't, prone to possibly making mistakes there. I'd like to see more, let the guys play, let them go out. Let it be a grinded out series. Don't call everything. Don't be nitpicky. So I'm hoping for less action from the referees in this series.
Less is more.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I disagree. I want more penalties, and I want more power plays for the Bruins, and I'll deal with more power plays for the Bruins and more PK for the Bruins because I'll take if it's 5-on-5, if it's 5 power plays versus 5 PKs, and I'll take the Bruins percentage of scoring on 3 out of 5 and stopping 2 out of 5 and winning the game.
All right, it's fair enough.
No, I think the rest is something to be mentioned just based on this year alone. Like we started talking about and you saw it, the inconsistency, right? For me, if there's consistency across the board, then I'm happy.
No, yeah, consistency is key. As Jared, as you know, you're the king of consistency when it comes to your umpiring.
I try to be. Nothing boils my rear end more of just not calling it across the board or being consistent. Or if you're going to call it consistently bad, call it consistently bad. Don't show fits of brilliance.
Yeah, it's a fair enough point. Let's go into our picks. And this is going to be fun to hear the reasonings for. Jared, let's start with you of who you got.
Well, I think once again, I'm going to go against tradition, even though after this I have a tie to the Bruins and the last time the Blues and the Bruins played in the Stanley Cup Finals. I'll leave that as our outro. I really feel, and I always like to go with the underdog. I always like to go with a team that has a good story behind them, not necessarily saying that the Bruins don't have a good story behind them. I just have a feeling it's the Blues' year. To never have a team go from dead let. Now we're talking in a 31-team league, not the 6-team league or the 12-team. Never having a team go from the shit house to the penthouse like they have. It's really just a great story with the Blues between Gloria and the Mummers Bar down here in South Philly. They actually have a watch party outside tonight. From my understanding, they're going to have a screen outside in front of the bar.
Interesting.
So they're just going to have a huge block party down there.
That'll be a scene.
Absolutely will be.
Down on 2nd Street. Holy shit.
And then the young lady dealing with cancer and how they rallied around here. I mean, team of destiny, in my opinion. Once again, cliche guy over here. I say the Blues in 7.
I like it, Greg.
Jordy, it's hard to bet against the Bruins just based on how things match up on paper. But as Jared said, sometimes storylines are more than enough for teams to win. And you go to any championship that has been won in any final playoff, like any finals that has happened, and it's been the story that has won out in the end. Like the Red Sox 86-year curse, the Cubs 100 and whatever year curse, it's always been the story that has won out versus the on paper. But like even this year, on paper, the Rams should have blown out the Patriots, but the Patriots had that, us versus the world and every single storyline you can imagine, and they won again. So for me, I think I'm sticking with the paper. I'm sticking with the facts. I think the Blues will try and be physical, and they'll try and outmatch the Bruins' physicality, and I think that's going to land them in some trouble. I think they're going to go on the PK, and I think the Bruins' power play is too good at the end of the day to not score goals and not take advantage. And I think the Bruins get the production from Tuukka, and I think they end up winning this series in I'm going to say 6 just because we never have had the luxury of seeing Boston teams really win at home recently. So I'm going to have to say
for you. For you.
They're
13 days and 3 rub and tugs later. Come on.
They're going to have to win.
Poor Greg doesn't get to see his teams win at home.
They're going to have to win on the road just like all the others.
Oh, just like all the other peons.
Yeah, I'm going with the Bruins as well. I'm going with them in 7. Jared, I agree with you. I think this is going to be an awesome series, and it's going to be it's going to be back and forth. I think I would almost bet the farm on games 1 and 3 for the respective home teams, but those other games I think are complete toss-ups. But I'm going with the Bruins because I think their depth is just a little deeper than what St. Louis has in terms of forward. I think while the Blues have that offensive ability on the back end with the defenseman, like we talked about a little bit. Greg, I agree with you. I think they're going to try to chameleon their way to try to match physicality and get themselves in trouble a little bit there. And then, I just think Tuukka's riding a really hot glove right now, as hot as Jordan Binnington's been. I think he's just going to be a little bit better. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be another exciting series like the last time the Bruins won 7 games. And we walk away from there. And I want to ask you guys this too. Who do you got for the Conn Smythe Trophy, playoffs MVP?
I mean, for me, it has to be the guy who is leading in all 4 major categories for his position, and that has to be Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, I would agree. If the Bruins pull it out, it's Tuukka.
Even if they lose, if they lose and every game is 2-1, 3-1,
pulls the Hextall,
or the Hasek, or
Hasek too,
or who was the guy for the Flames?
Giguere from the Ducks. He won it when they lost to the Devils.
Yeah, yeah. So I think he gets it regardless. I think he's been that good these playoffs.
I like it.
Granted,
Jared, what about you?
That's he doesn't let up 7 goals a game, but yes, moving forward, I think it's him.
I like it.
I say that if it's the Blues, it'll end up being Binnington. With that, but I think I actually think it'll be Brad Marchand could win it.
Okay,
Bruins.
I like it. Yeah, I mean he's certainly putting up the numbers for it, a point per game. That's a good pick, Jared. If he has an outstanding series and it's something where it becomes a little more of a run and gun series, I could see Marchand taking it out. Good job by you. Great pick.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts we have on this series going forward, boys?
What are your picks?
I went Tuukka with if the Bruins win, and I think it'd be cool to see Tuukka win it if they lose, but Jared, I'm gonna go with you. I think Binnington gets it if they end up winning.
Yeah, I'm going Tuukka regardless, and I think the Bruins in 6.
Yeah. So I alluded to it. My connection to this series.
Oh yeah.
This story. In 1970, you had the Blues and the Bruins in the Stanley Cup Final, and one Robert Gordon Orr scored the game winner in overtime.
The legend,
the legend. So, Greg, I don't think you know this, but I am related to Bobby Orr.
That's really cool.
It's like 18 times removed, but my grandmother, Mary Barnes, her maiden name is Orr. And Bobby is either her grandnephew or great-nephew. And it is. The only thing when it comes to the relation is I have a huge nose like Bobby Orr. We both got elbows poking out of our face, and I have no hockey talent in comparison to him. I am not an offensive defenseman. I'm very offensive in general, but I don't have the offensive ability. So
you grind it down in front of the goalie. You move some guys around, Jared. Don't sell yourself short.
Well, but it's like my golf game. I sell myself short and overperform.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that people don't realize the Bobby Orr, the dive overtime winner, that was a 4-game sweep. People think it's game 7. People think
the Blues have never won a game. They've made the finals 3. They made the finals 3 straight years, and they got swept all 3 years.
Yeah, people think it's a big thing, but it was really just a sweep. And all-time moment, iconic thing, and over under that storyline is mentioned 6 times in the first 2 games.
Oh, at least.
Yeah. Oh man, does Al Michaels have anything to do with this? Because he'll say it like 20 times to really fuck up the over.
He was there, right?
Yeah, I think it was. Did he call it?
No, I was just fucking.
Oh, all right.
And I
He
think
called a miracle. He could have called that.
it's true. And I think the other thing, boys, is don't forget what today's about. It's not about barbecue, and it's not about drinking beers. It's not about the Stanley Cup tonight. If it wasn't for the men and women in our armed forces that have come before us and paid the ultimate sacrifice, we wouldn't have this today. We'll be sitting here, and hopefully, Jordy, you can make it over later on here, have a couple beverages here in the command center as we watch.
Yeah.
Just thank a veteran, think about those that have come before us, and we wouldn't be able to have this bullpen carton, this Thunder blog, if it wasn't for that. So happy Memorial Day to everybody, boys. It's always a pleasure to, even though it's through the interwebs, a series of tubes, be with you guys.
Yeah, well said, Jared. And I thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so just building off of that, I went to Billy Joel on Friday night. And Friday night, Memorial Day weekend, it was pretty great concert. He plays Goodnight Saigon at one point, and you could see down on the floor there were guys in their dress whites, and it was really cool to see them. And he brought them up on stage and had them arm in arms, Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Really powerful moment. So yeah, if you see a vet, a vet, please go thank one. You're not, like Jared said, it's not just about beers and barbecue, but it's about so much more.
Couldn't agree more. Both you gentlemen, and Jordy, humble brag about your concert. So
glad you're able. Graduation present.
I'm glad you're able to slip that in there for yourself.
Oh yeah, and congratulations to G-Dub with the graduation there, bub.
Yeah, hopefully I get a job soon. So I can have some cash again. It's been too long.
Hey, student loans are a myth, Jordy. We should all give our money away, as the politicians say. But
yeah, we should also. We went to that one college where they're all getting forgiven.
Yes, unfortunately, we don't meet the criteria to make it into that college.
Yeah,
but
that's a very good point. Yeah, right from the get go.
Jordy, go Bees. Jared, pleasure as always. I'm glad that this season has brought us together yet again. And if we're being honest, I'm glad that you picked differently, so I can overtake you again in the playoff long predictions that we've had.
Hey, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, everything's up in the air for that. But boys, I appreciate you guys both hopping on for this. It's obviously a ton of fun, and doing the podcast it means a lot to me, and I'm glad to share it with both of you. So thank you guys for doing this.
Yes, sir.
Jordy, go Greg.
All right, stay classy, Philly. I'll see you later, Jordy.
Go, bro.
Yeah, I'll see you guys in a bit. Everybody make sure to like, share, subscribe, and have a great week.
Go Bees.
Finally summer.
Go Bees.
David Children.